Hey, how's everyone doing today? My name is Billy. I'm a social work student at University of South Carolina. All right, I'm also an intern at Palmetto Health Richland Springs, which is the behavioral care unit of Palmetto Health Richland. All right, today I want to talk to you all about the 10 social work competencies and how I apply them at my internship. The first competency I want to talk about is identify as a professional social worker and conduct oneself accordingly. All right, so I apply that to my internship by advocating for patients. Okay, I take some time to reflect and I make some self corrections. So what that means is when I reflect, I basically go to my field instructor and I say, hey, you know, what can I do better or what am I doing right? And she provides me with that feedback. And self correction is as simple as it sounds. Making corrections to oneself, and that's what I do if I feel like I've made an error or I've done something that may have caused some undue stressors to one of the patients. The second social work competency is apply social work ethical principles to guide professional practice. So for me, what I do is before I walk in the front door, I like to check my personal biases and leave them outside. I don't even bring them inside with me. Okay. And I do this so I don't affect my rapport with the patients. All right. The third competency is apply critical thinking to inform and communicate professional judgments. So what I do is a lot of times I do interviews for, admitting patients. And Richland Springs, they have their own set of policies that guide how we write integrative summaries or how we write treatment plans. So I make use of those policies, to affect my professional judgment. And then I also use iChart, which is a part of Cerner Works, which is the online system that we use at Palmetto Health to track patient information. And in using this system, I go through the multiple links that are offered to draw pertinent information about patients when I'm writing my integrative summaries. The fourth competency is engage diversity and difference in practice. So me, I'm gonna be honest. I'm a very emotional person. I love to laugh. I get angry at times. And when these things happen, my face shows it all. So what I like to do is I like to make sure I'm checking my facial expressions and I'm checking my body language. I want to make sure I'm not too tense at somebody. I try to have a non-threatening position by standing sideways. I try to make sure my hands are not placed behind my back. I try not to cross them in front of myself when I'm speaking to patients because, they do have persistent and severe mental illness. So I want to make sure that when I'm addressing them, that they are comfortable. Okay. And another thing that I like to do is I like to involve the patient in their discharge and aftercare planning. Now, even though that's a part of the system and how we do things, I try to make sure I'll take it one step further by involving them in everything that I talk about. If I speak with somebody that they've given me consent, and by giving consent, they sign a release of information, I make sure I go over that information with the patient so they understand that I have their best interest at heart, in everything that I'm trying to do. The fifth competency is going to be advanced human rights and social and economic justice. So one thing that Richland Springs provides when a patient is discharging is advanced directives. And advanced directives is basically saying if you feel like you cannot care for yourself, you can appoint someone to do it for you. So if that's still unclear to you, think about a power of attorney or, guardianship, things of that sort. Okay. So the sixth competency is engage in research informed practice and practice informed research. All right. So what I like to do is I like to make use of those policies that I was talking about earlier for treatment plans. Whenever we do have a new patient who's being admitted, once we do everything, the integrative summary is complete, we have to do a treatment plan. The treatment plan informs the treatment team of how the patient's acting, if they're responding well to their medications, and in the social work standpoint about, any barriers to discharge and aftercare planning. So I make use of those policies, to inform the practice that I'm doing. The seventh competency is apply knowledge of human behavior in the social environment. And for that, I like to interact, with patients about their behaviors that could possibly affect their placement options. Not everyone that comes in is in a good situation. Some people are homeless. Some people are coming from a home, but they cannot return. So what we try to do is we try to make sure we place them in the most meaningful place, but their actions can hinder that, like being sexually inappropriate or, having a history of aggression and violence. So we try to interact with the patients to make sure they understand that their behaviors could hold them back from having a meaningful life outside of Richland Springs. The eighth competency is engage in policy practice to advance social and economic well-being and to deliver social work services. So for that, we want to advocate for patient rights. So without giving information up about a specific client, I will say that we have a client who is being housed who should not be there anymore. But because the physician feels a certain way, the client is still there. So as a social worker, I'm trying to advocate for his rights and his, self-empowerment and self-determination. The ninth competency is respond to contexts that shape practice. And in doing so, we want to provide relevant services. So what I'm doing as a student is I'm trying to learn the different administrators when I'm calling and seeking placement for these patients. And once I learn something new about an administrator, I take the notes and I provide the feedback to my field instructor. In turn, she provides me feedback if she already has that knowledge of the administrator that I'm learning about. And then the 10th social work competency is engage, assess, intervene, and evaluate with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. So when we engage with them at my internship, the process is, speaking with nursing staff to make sure it's safe to talk to the patients, because not every patient is safe to speak with, and then once we want to move on to the assessment portion, which is when I go in and I interview with the patient and I write the integrative summaries. Before I write integrative summaries, I also try to make sure I speak with family if the patient has signed a release of information for me to do so. And then we move on to intervention, which is, providing community resources, places to stay, places like LRADAC, who help with substance use disorders or, substance misuse disorders, or Morris Village, another place that deals with substance use and misuse. And then, we have the evaluation, which for me is following up with my field instructor to ensure that I provided the best possible services to that patient before their discharge. So I've covered the 10 competencies of social work, and I hope that you learned something. You have a great day.